Hello and welcome to Growing Through It, your go-to podcast for real leadership stories. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. In every episode, you'll hear straight talk from leaders who face their own challenges. We'll dive into those whoops moments and the insights that followed. This podcast is about the lessons that refine us, shared to help you confidently lead in your own style. Whether you're looking to steer your team towards success or just seeking a spark of inspiration, you're in the right place. Let's grow through it together. Hey there, and welcome to the Growing Through It podcast. I'm your host, Jen Arnold, and today is a recap or a summarization or a highlight of my interview with Rucker Taylor, the head baseball coach at Davidson College. Now, if you haven't listened to it, that's okay. I want to put a fine point on just a few things he said and hopefully kind of pull the thread out to your own leadership. Now, excuse the stuffy nose. I've managed to get a cold this weekend. So I'm going on day 4. No one else in my house is sick except for me. So I'm the lucky winner of this nice head cold. But anyway, one of the things that was really the key part of Rucker's interview was him getting frustrated. Now, as a leader, it is normal to get frustrated with your team. It's normal to get frustrated with things in general because just working with people is frustrating. So a little bit of frustration is going to happen from time to time. But with Rucker, what he noticed was a continued frustration. He was like, he didn't say constantly frustrated, but more frustrated on an ongoing basis than he'd like to be. And I know I've been there as a leader, and I, back in the day, was leading a team of 15 people, and I was hired to upskill these people. So they were a functioning team, 15 people. They already worked in a job, and my job as their leader going into the role was to upskill them, kind of change the role to be, I'm going to say like a higher level role. They would have to learn new skills. They would have to do new things, but still working with the same customers and clients. And so I remember getting extremely frustrated that people weren't going fast enough. It's one of my many downfalls. And I remember asking them to do this presentation. So I said, hey, here's some parameters. I want you to come present to the team. It's going to be me. It's going to be everyone else. And you're going to have to present for, I think it's maybe 5 minutes. Choose something that you normally would present to a client. And it's just for practice. And of course, some people were petrified and some people did really well. But I remembered there was someone in particular who just would frustrate me because although they were a good presenter, like they would show up and it was just one of their skills. But it was obvious that they did not know what they were talking about. They didn't actually put the work in. They didn't actually practice any of this stuff. They just showed up, relied on their natural strengths to present. But it was very obviously they didn't do any of the work to prepare, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. You just have to try. So I remember getting really frustrated with this person. It was like a continued situation. And the one thing that I regret not doing is really look back at myself, just as Rucker did with him. Is like, as a leader, what does this person need to do better? Can they do better? Am I giving them the resources they need, the tools they need, the time they need to get up to speed? And of course, give them that time. And then if they can't get up to speed, there's a different conversation to be had, of course. But what can you do if you end up getting frustrated at your team or in a particular team member? How can you reflect back to yourself and ask yourself, how can I give them the resources or tools or time to get up to speed? So do they need more of that? Or is it a skill issue? Or is it a job fit issue? So number one point, when you're frustrated, look at yourself and see what you can do to alleviate that frustration and maybe get your team something that they need. Maybe they're getting frustrated. All right. The second point I want to bring up is Rucker said, he was getting frustrated because he thought a lot of what his team needed was common sense. Because of course he was a baseball player. He went through it. He's now the coach. It is very much common sense to him. But of course, he's, leading 18-year-old kids, 21-year-old kids, I'm in my 40s, so that's definitely kids for me. But they don't know some of this stuff that appears to be common sense. And again, turning it back to my leadership style, this is a huge flaw in my leadership because I do expect people to figure it out. And it's one of the things that I know I need to work on. And luckily I have a good team around me that ask me some very good clarifying questions. But one book that really helped me get better, and, it's a continued journey, is the book Who, Not How by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. I'll link this up in the show notes. But especially I own my own business, so it's very helpful for me because it's actually, I'd say for any leader, we have the tendency just to do it ourselves because it's easier and you don't have to explain it. It's easier, it's faster, it'll get done the way you want it. But that is a terrible way to go about it if you were leading anything because you need to be focused on other things. So what the book taught me was to just tell them what the outcome you're looking for is. You don't need to tell them how to get there. They can hopefully manage their own work and you can give them some autonomy. But for example, one of the things that I did last year was onboard some new facilitators. And I have content that I deliver at work sites to employees and leaders. And I didn't always want to be the facilitator. And so I needed to get my content in shape so they could actually teach it. So the outcome that I wanted was the slides would be able to be used by someone who has a basic knowledge of the topic. And so working with our instructional designer, which she asked some lovely questions, it's like, what is the outcome? What do they actually need? Do they need a full script? No, they don't. They need key points, and actually ask them, like, what do you actually need? If I was to hand this over to you, do you want a script or do you want key points? So just key points are fine. So asking is very helpful, but just laying out the outcome. I don't need to tell Debbie how I want her to do it. I definitely don't need to do it myself because she's actually better at writing those key points than I am, even though I teach it all the time. So I'm trying to use the who, not how, so I can pull myself out of some of the weeds and to be able to do some of the work I need to do as the leader of this company. So check out the book if you have a problem with delegation or if you have a problem just kind of doing everything yourself, who, not how. And then finally, one of the interesting parts about Rucker's interview is that I sensed with every leader, we're on this journey of leadership and our leadership style is going to evolve and grow. So one of the things I asked Rucker was, do you prefer to sit down with your team, have a 2-hour meeting, go over all the outlines explicitly? Is that more of your natural style versus kind of the loosey-goosey, we'll just figure it out? And so he was saying that, the more natural tendency is to be like, let's sit down, we're going to go have a meeting and go through all the details. But he found himself getting a little bit more loosey-goosey because he got in his head. He was like, I don't want to always be in the guys' faces and I don't always want to be that voice. I want to be able to let other leaders emerge. So you will, if you were leading right now, you probably have a natural tendency in how you want to lead. And sometimes that's a great thing, right? If you're more detail oriented and that's going to be your leadership style, that is perfectly okay. I think it's just paying attention to what you naturally want to do and then kind of listening to that voice in your head and figuring out what's talking you out of it. But sometimes we want to lead in a certain way, but then we tell ourselves, I shouldn't be doing that. That's not the way to lead. Or maybe we're looking at pictures of other people who are leading and they don't do it that way. But truly part of leadership is getting into and leaning into your natural style. Not everyone's going to like it, and that's just how it is. So hopefully if you have this consistent style in your leadership with the goal of always improving, then at least your team knows what to expect. They say, oh yeah, I know. Rucker's going to expect us to have this 2-hour meeting every season or 3 times a season. Okay, well, that's just who they are. and it's good for the team. So sometimes you just need to suck it up. So all of this to say is just pay attention to that voice in your head that tells you, I shouldn't be doing this, or I should be doing it this other way. Just pay attention, find out kind of how you naturally like to lead, but then always look at the outcomes, right? So if you naturally lead loosey-goosey and you're finding it's having a negative impact on your team, you're going to have to adjust, or hopefully you'll adjust to have better outcomes. So it's this combination of your natural leadership style and then finding out what actually works, what gives you the best outcomes with your team. And that takes time, that takes patience, that takes failing and learning. And that's all part of the journey. So I hope this was helpful for you today. Let me just summarize 3 quick things. 1, when you are getting frustrated, take a look at yourself. Take a look at not blaming it on your team, but asking yourself, what can I do better as a leader? Secondly, be very explicit in what you expect. Lay out expectations. Don't ask people to figure it out. No one is a mind reader. And third, just be patient as you find your natural leadership style and the natural leadership style that's going to have the best outcomes. So if you have not signed up, in addition to this podcast that happens every other week, I also send out a tip from the interview to the email list. And so I will link up where you can sign up for that if you prefer just to read some of these tips. And then finally, the interviews that I have with people are on YouTube. So if you're ever curious of what, if you want to see us talk, then you can head over to YouTube and watch us there. Again, I'll link those up in the show notes. But hopefully this was helpful for you. And I will see you next time for my interview with another leader. See you then. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us on Growing Through It. I'm Jen Arnold, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If today's story sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and share it with your fellow leaders. And remember, each episode comes with a nugget of wisdom that we expand on in our newsletter. So if you're eager to put these insights into action, head over to our website at growthsignals.co and sign up for exclusive content that'll give you an edge in your leadership journey. Keep growing, and I'll connect with you again soon in our next episode. Until then, take the lessons learned and lead authentically.